These shareholders are killing video games. At least that's what every YouTuber seems to be claiming. But are they really the ones killing gaming? Or is that just the lazy answer we've all been conditioned to accept? You see, I'm not just another gamer with a mic. I finished law school. So unlike most of these creators, I can analyze this mess through a legal perspective. When I started digging into how shareholders really operate and whether they are the root cause of a broken, greedy industry, I found something that completely reframed how I see their role in gaming. And trust me, what I uncovered changes everything. When researching the topic, most YouTubers will say broken games are released to please the shareholders. And while that's technically true, it's not the full picture. I'm bored of this basic answer constantly appearing in people's discussions and videos. So I dug deeper into the topic and believe I have found the true answer for why broken games are released. The first answer for releasing broken games is the end of the financial year. Most game companies are formed as public companies. As a public company, they have to report their financial statements to the public. In the UK, this is usually yearly, but in the US, it is mandatory to provide a financial statement every quarter, breaking down their revenue, profit, and losses. Shareholders, analysts, and even investors use these numbers to decide whether they should buy, hold, or sell shares of the company. So when a company like EA or CD Projekt Red has a major release lined up, it becomes a financial pillar for that quarter. Missing that window doesn't just delay the game, it tanks investor confidence, lowers the share price, and can set off a chain reaction of financial panic. This is exactly what happened with Cyberpunk 2077 and Battlefield 2042. These games had to release in its designated window, even though they were not ready. The marketing was done, the earnings were projected, there was no room for delay. The financial machine was already in motion, and that deadline couldn't be missed, even if it meant releasing a broken product. From a financial standpoint, it made perfect sense. Ship the game in its current state and secure sales, then patch it later, and hope the numbers look good enough on paper to satisfy shareholder needs. Although both projects succeeded in generating some revenue in the short term through their scheduled releases, it destroyed the game's reputation and fan bases, and ironically also destroyed their share price and value long term. Now, I mentioned financial statements are by design for the benefit of shareholders. Therefore, it can be easy to blame them at this moment. But are they really to blame for this? Not directly. As I mentioned, US law requires companies to release quarterly statements. Because of this, game companies have to adopt a short-term approach to ensure their financial statements look great for shareholders and investors. The law requires this to offer protection to investors who need to be informed of the success of the company they are invested in. To achieve this, they are often forced to release something to ensure sales, even if it's not ready. Because financial statements capture short-term yearly performance. A quick boost in sales, timed perfectly, can dramatically improve investment and shareholder confidence. Directors don't care if they have to continue releasing broken games if revenue can still come in. And the lengths they are willing to push this is seen in my next discovery. Directors often abuse their positions and provide financial misstatements. Like I have mentioned, releasing broken games is an industry standard. Recently, Capcom used this approach for the release of Monster Hunter Wilds. Capcom had to strategically set the game to release in November to ensure sale numbers were met. As a result of this rushed schedule, Capcom had to ship Monster Hunter Wilds as an unfinished product, resulting in optimization issues on PC. And it weren't just this title that was affected. Street Fighter, another one of their major IPs, is currently dramatically lacking updated content for a title that has been out for over 2 years. Capcom did this because they had promised shareholders a 10% growth for the next decade. It is these ambitious promises that are setting up game companies for failure. In trying to please shareholders and improve their financial statements, impossible claims are made by company directors, and the trend is to make each claim more ridiculous than the last. I mean, Ubisoft's director called their upcoming game Skull and Bones the first quadruple A game. It's funny because this approach clearly shouldn't work, and yet game companies continue to maintain this methodology, often ignoring the terrible consequences that obviously come when releasing a broken game. But the problem for us gamers is that sometimes it does work, at least financially. For Capcom, this is the case. Capcom have actually achieved a 10% growth for the past 8 years consecutively, an insane ambitious promise being met. And although Monster Hunter Wilds released unfinished, it still became one of the highest selling games of the year. The gamble for Capcom worked incredibly. But even with this success, I don't like this approach. It creates a system where the priority is not fun, not art, not even quality, but return on investment. Games are no longer cultural products. They are financial vehicles that game companies are constantly churning out in any state possible to have a guaranteed revenue generator for each part of the year. Directors, who are often individuals who don't even understand the product or game of their very own company, are making unachievable promises at shareholder meetings and quarterly statements, in the hopes to generate hype and momentum for company value. And in doing this, they usually have a scheduled roadmap to fill in every quarter that they cannot meet, causing industry crunch, outsourcing, and broken games to satisfy a financial statement for its shareholders. Therefore, it is sensible to conclude that shareholders are causing broken games to release, as game developers are essentially pushing out unfinished games based off lies, just to ensure higher investment, a quicker short-term sales, and to help improve shareholders' share value.
Objection!
However, shareholders should not be blamed for the law's failure to capture long-term vision. In the UK, Section 172 of the Companies Act 2006 states that directors must act in a way that promotes the success of the company for the benefit of its shareholders. The law itself emphasizes the importance of shareholders' needs for protecting the success of the company, with many scholars arguing it's the only vital piece. Directors face immense pressure from the law to satisfy shareholders' needs. Therefore, a majority of their decisions are based on how to meet these shareholder needs. And as evidence shows, these are very poor decisions for the game industry. But although the law pressurizes these directors, it is still the directors who decide how to respond to this pressure. They can still choose the company's fate, and that's the ignored issue. Directors could choose a long-term path, slightly higher costs, better games later, but instead they chase short-term wins. Like EA with Battlefield, had they delayed 2042 by a year or two, they could have easily dominated the modern FPS landscape today. Call of Duty, their main competitor, has been on a decline for years. They had the chance to do what they once did with Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, deliver industry-defining experiences. But the execs didn't think long-term, and because of this, the franchise is at a serious risk of failing, with the future release of Battlefield 6 being considered as the last chance for the franchise. This isn't just a gaming issue, it's a universal corporate dilemma. On one side, the shareholder primacy model argues that shareholders own the company and therefore deserve priority. And that makes sense. If you own stock, you'd want a return on your investment. But the problem is that even minority shareholders, often with no understanding of the industry, can exert enormous influence on the company. That leads to short-sighted decisions based on short-term trends, not the actual needs of the company or the audience. The stakeholder theory, on the other hand, argues that directors should act in the interest of all, including employees, customers, and long-term company health. And this mindset is what the games industry desperately needs. You can't make a good game on a quarterly schedule. It takes time, vision, and breathing room. We've seen what happens when companies abandon this. Ubisoft, once a titan, now regularly drops unfinished, forgettable titles. The consequences are visible. Whoever you still decide to blame at this point doesn't really matter. As long as broken games continue to be bought by us fans, the broken games can continue to be released. A huge issue is the fact that gamers keep pre-ordering games even though we know there's a very high chance the game will be broken. Pre-orders used to make sense in the physical era, when stock could run out. But now, in the age of digital downloads, it's pointless. The game will be there on launch day. Yet, we still do it. We fall for pre-order bonuses and early access bait. And that feeds right back into the financial predictions that let these executives keep making the same broken messes. Here's the truth. Every time we pre-order, we're giving them proof that they can sell us a product before it's finished.
Shut up and take my money!
We're validating that very system we hate. But I discovered pre-ordering games actually has a deeper and darker motive for these game companies. Pre-orders are great for generating revenue early, but us consumers can still refund the game even within the cooling off period, and in effect, make that pre-order worthless. Well, the pre-order is actually there to mainly secure hype. A company has many different variations, and as such, they will always have varying strategies. The strategy for Apple would be very different from the strategy of Red Bull. With game companies, it is very clear which model these directors and executives have decided to borrow from: the tech company's hype cycle. This strategy follows a 5-stage model and is commonly used in the tech world to describe how new innovations rise and fall in public perception. But it also perfectly describes the way modern AAA games are developed. First, we have the innovation trigger. This is the moment a new game is revealed. Maybe it's a cinematic trailer, a gameplay teaser, or even just a logo. It promises revolutionary new features, stunning graphics, or wild technical claims. Hype then builds up to stage 2. Fans go wild, pre-orders soar, and the media amplifies every feature, whether it's realistic or not. This hype doesn't just boost engagement, it drives up the company's share price, increases investor confidence, and unlocks more funding and marketing resources. At stage 3, reality sets in. The game finally launches, and it's buggy, unfinished, or just not what was promised. Players feel betrayed, critics panic, and negative headlines roll in. This is the crash after the high, often entirely predictable in hindsight. Now, if the studio survives the backlash, the game may start to slowly recover through updates, bug fixes, expansions, and community support. It can regain some credibility. Players start to return. Word of mouth improves, and the narrative shifts from disaster to underrated gem. This continues till the game reaches its maturity. This is the exact timeline that Cyberpunk went through. A game that was probably one of the most hyped games ever. The reality set once it released completely broken. And today it has revived itself to be considered in the top 10 games ever made, and a must-have modern title. What makes this model so attractive to corporations is that the early stages, hype and promise, generate the highest return on investment. Even if a game flops at launch, the pre-release hype and inflated share price can secure funding, satisfy investors, and create short-term gains. In other words, they can afford to fail because the illusion of success was already profitable. Therefore, a majority of games will continue to release broken. The system that these companies follow are set up to accept failure, because the actual product wouldn't bring in the highest share value in cash. The hype will. Evidently, alternative models are needed in the games industry, which I will touch on later in this video. But first, we need to examine another issue in the game industry that shareholders are being blamed for. One of the most controversial aspects of games today is the monetization methods used by game developers. Monetization strategies at this current time lead game design. The sad reality is, most directors in gaming have chosen the shareholder primacy model. That means monetization comes first, before the gameplay, before the fans, before the art. It's all about squeezing money out of the player, and now we're seeing just how far that can go. There's a major shift happening right now in how games make money, and some of it is honestly just insane. We're talking ads in full-price games, not free-to-play, not mobile, full-price games. Ubisoft and Activision have already started rolling this out. You drop £70 on a game and still get hit with advertising mid-game. It's disgusting. But it gets worse. Activision has filed a patent for a matchmaking system to make players pay more for their skins. The matchmaking system intentionally pairs you with players who have cosmetics you don't own, just so you feel like you're missing out. The design leads to players being beaten by players with better cosmetics and weapons, creating a mental frustration for the player, who then justifies to themselves they also need that skin. All of this is becoming normal now. You can see how predatory it is getting. And a lot of it is tied to the rise of free-to-play games. Let's be real, most gamers today expect games to be free. If they're not, they move on. But a free game doesn't mean it doesn't make money. It just means you become the product. That's how they get you. When researching this topic further, I stumbled on a research paper by the University of York. The paper was analysing problematic microtransactions in video games. A very interesting part of the paper was their outline of all the methods of monetization used by game developers. There were 35 different methods listed, which shocked me. Gone are the days where the only payment we made was the upfront purchase price of the game. We also now have to tackle 35 predatory methods to get us to spend money. The business model for these games is simple: make you want to keep playing. Not because it's fun, but because you've already spent money. Buy a skin, buy a limited battle pass, next thing you know you're £50 deep and logging in every day, so that money wasn't wasted for no reason. The best example today would be the FIFA FC series. Actual gameplay of FC has been on a decline for years, but people are absolutely addicted to Ultimate Team. The majority of the player base don't even want to play matches and enjoy the gameplay. They just want to open packs with real money. Shareholders and corporate greed are always blamed for microtransactions. I agree with parts of this sentiment. Trust me, I also don't like microtransactions, but not all of them are unjustified. And at the end of the day, it is always up to the player how they spend their money, with it being very much possible to continue to play games without spending extra money than is necessary. But still, this explanation won't cut it for the biggest haters of microtransactions, and I understand this. So why am I proposing that we can't blame game developers and shareholders for this approach? It's because this next part of games is often ignored. Even when we buy a game for $70, or even at a higher $80 price as it's soon to be, we are still buying games at a cheaper price. You're probably now screaming at me, you think $80 is cheap, I get you, but adjusted to inflation and rising costs, we are actually paying much less. Games have seen an absolutely massive increase in development costs, with development costs outpacing unit pricing. In the early 2000s, game development costs averaged around $4 million, with developers charging $50 for the game. Today, development costs have risen into the $200 to $300 million range on average, with Black Ops Cold War even hitting $700 million, a 50 to 75 times increase in costs, and the price of the game still only $70. That is a 1.4 times increase in price. When you pair this with the ever-increasing presence for demanding free games, game developers are clearly underpaid for their games. The only reason they can get away with it is because of the huge amount of gamers willing to buy games and microtransactions. Therefore, shareholders are not the blame for the ever-increasing presence of microtransactions. They are needed to help support the low prices we pay to actually play the games in the first place. Now, I acknowledge this argument does have its flaws, because with this power, certain game developers use it for evil. When microtransactions are done wrong, they are done extremely wrong, and corporate greed is at full display, harming the experience for the user. But I feel in today's market, these evils are punished more heavily, and as such, we have now seen a more balanced approach for game developers when implementing microtransactions into their games, especially with most microtransactions being cosmetic only. I can see why shareholders are quickly blamed for microtransactions though, because of the negative connotations that surround them. But the reality is that microtransactions are here to stay, because there are many people who are willing to pay for them, and we are currently underpaying for games. What is important though is that game developers don't astray too far in demanding money from players. By following a balanced approach, harmony can be achieved between players and shareholder needs. However, this next issue is probably the gaming industry's biggest problem. I've been playing games my entire life. Back in the day, I'd walk into a game store, pick out 5 random PS2 titles, barely knowing what they were about, and somehow every single one was interesting, weird, fun, or just outright memorable. And I know a lot of you have that same experience. Looking back now, it's obvious the 2000s were the golden age of gaming. That era felt like everyone was reaching for something new. No copy-paste formulas, just pure experimentation. So why does it feel like creativity has died in video games? And why are shareholders blamed for this? The difference is simple. Back then, game studios were led by creatives, not corporations. They made games they wanted to play, not just games they wanted to sell. They took risks, and more often than not, those risks paid off. Today, risk is treated like a virus. In AAA studios, innovation is seen as a liability to profits. Anything unfamiliar is quietly killed in the boardroom, because failure isn't allowed, not when the shareholders are watching. Anthem is a fantastic example of when risk fails. This was a BioWare-developed game, the studio behind the Mass Effect trilogy, so when they announced a brand new IP, Anthem, the hype was unreal. But then the game dropped, and it was, as you predicted, a disaster. Cutscenes felt like broken PS1 tech demos, core mechanics were missing, players were confused, disappointed, and even angry. Anthem wasn't just a bad launch, it was a loud public failure. The cost? EA's share price dropped, investor confidence plummeted, and BioWare's reputation practically gone overnight. But most importantly, Anthem sent a message to the entire industry. Don't experiment, don't create. Stick to what's safe to save time and money. Had they just released another Mass Effect, the game probably would have not flopped as hard. This fear of failure has hollowed out creativity in AAA studios. It's not because the devs are lazy, it's because the people funding them will punish failure more than they reward success. Now what do we get every year? Call of Duty, FIFA, Assassin's Creed, the same several IPs recycled year on year. And when we are not getting a new game, we are just getting a remake of a classic. It is starting to feel like we play the same games every year. This formula works for game developers because it's predictable. Costs of the game are more controlled because it is much cheaper to reuse the same assets and tweak them slightly. For remakes, this is practically a one-to-one copy. The revenue therefore is forecastable, risk is minimal, and shareholders are happy with the numbers. Yet ironically, this strategy contradicts a very law that directors are supposed to follow. Directors are legally obliged to consider long-term company success, not just quarterly profits. Directors know this, trust me, and we have already explored why they continue to adopt this short-term approach. The simple fact is, it is way easier to manipulate long-term success. You can say you're investing in the future while cutting costs and recycling IPs. And since consequences for long-term decisions won't be felt for years, it is easy to mask it behind short-term success. Although I do welcome remasters and existing IPs, as they usually are fantastic pieces of media, game developers still need to put more effort into innovation and not just focus on profit maximization for shareholders. Again, shareholders are at the forefront of the decision making, so the analysis always seems to fall back on them. But innovation can also make profit for these shareholders, so why doesn't it? Well, imagine two games. They're both shooters, 50 guns, 10 maps, but game A is called Call of Duty, and game B is a new title called Armed Forces. You only have money for one. You would choose COD. Why? Because you know and are familiar with the existing IP and formula. This is the problem. We as a community are not buying innovative games, and this isn't just a gaming phenomenon. Endless sequels, reboots, spin-offs, because originality is risky, and risks are punished financially. But not all hope is lost. There's a quiet resistance growing in the shadows. Games like Hollow Knight, Baldur's Gate 3, Stardew Valley, and even Schedule 1, game made by one single person may I add, are showing what happens when you don't have to answer to shareholders. Indie devs aren't even better developers. That's the truth, they are not. AAA games still have the best tools, talent and resources, but what indies do have is freedom. No publisher breathing down their neck, no quarterly revenue forecast, just a vision and the courage to follow it. That's why indie games today feel like what AAA games used to feel like, raw, passionate, weird and memorable, and it's working. What this means is that an audience does exist for innovation and gameplay, and when their needs are met, the audience rewards that game and its developers. The lack of creativity is a byproduct of wanting to maximize profits and being risk-averse. These are sensible methods for any company for long-term success, so it shouldn't be frowned upon, and as a consequence, shareholders will take the blame because they ultimately benefit. But still, more pressure should be out on game developers to innovate at a cost of profits, because innovation will always lead to greater returns in the long term, as seen with the industry's most innovative title, GTA. Now that we have covered some of the biggest issues in the game industry that shareholders are blamed for, I will bring it back to alternative structures that might actually improve these situations. What if gamers, not corporate investors, had a real say in the direction of game development? That's the core idea behind Germany's football ownership model. In the Bundesliga, fans hold 51% of the voting rights in their clubs. That means the people who care most about the long-term health of the team, the supporters, get the final say on big decisions, not profit-driven owners. Could the gaming industry adopt something similar? Imagine this, gaming studios open up shares directly to their player base. Fans become partial owners, not just consumers. That means studio priorities shift from whatever pleases Wall Street to what builds trust within the community. Fan ownership could promote creative risks, longer development cycles, and fewer exploitive practices like pay-to-win monetization. But there are challenges too. Like football fans, gaming audiences are more fragmented and less loyal over time. One viral controversy can flip public opinion overnight, and let's be honest, gamers don't always agree on what they want. Sometimes they demand a feature and then hate it when it launches. Still, models like this offer a powerful message. There are ways to structure gaming companies that prioritize creativity and community, not just quarterly earnings. Another powerful alternative is giving employees, especially developers and creatives, a meaningful share of ownership in the company. When developers own part of the business, they're not just cogs following orders. They become true stakeholders with a direct say in major decisions. This ownership aligns their interests with the long-term success of the studio, rather than just hitting quarterly profit targets. Why does this matter? Because when employees own their work, they tend to care more deeply about the quality, innovation, and impact of their games. They're motivated not only by deadlines or salaries, but by knowing their creativity directly contributes to their own financial and professional future. This can encourage risk-taking and experimentation, exactly what AAA studios need but often shy away from under shareholder pressure. Instead of rushing out safe sequels or milking microtransactions, employee owners are more likely to invest time and passion into bold original projects that push the medium forward. While some AAA studios like Capcom and tech-adjacent giants like Nvidia offer stock or equity programs, the model is still rare in many game companies, and expanding it could be a key to unlocking creativity and loyalty industry-wide. During law school, I learned that shareholders are often called the lifeblood of a company. Without their investment, a company simply can't survive. They provide the financial backbone that supports both day-to-day operations and future growth. This video aimed to shed light on just how much influence shareholders have over the decisions game developers make. That being said, it's not fair to blame shareholders alone for the creative drought in AAA games. The legal framework is designed to protect their investments, which means companies naturally prioritize steady profits over risky innovation. Right now, microtransactions, rushed releases, and simple games bring in the most reliable revenue, and keep shareholders happy. But meaningful change won't come from the top down. It requires us, the gaming community, to stop buying into broken products and instead support studios that prioritize creativity and quality. If we want a future where innovation thrives, we need new models that empower both fans and creators to influence the industry's direction. Until then, our wallets remain the ultimate vote. And on a final note that I have purposely left to close this video, remember, shareholders can be anyone who has invested into the shares of a company. A shareholder can be me or even you. Are you to blame for the decline of the games industry? Thanks for watching Law and Oro. If you want more deep dives like this, hit that like button